Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Weeknight. I'm Symone Sanders-Townsend with Alicia Menendez and Michael Steele. Breaking tonight, Donald Trump now says he doesn't know if his slush fund is dead. Despite Todd Blanche insisting it's done, Senator Gary Peters is here in a moment to weigh in.
Also ahead, Scott Pelley is going out fighting. The now fired 60 Minutes correspondent says editor-in-chief Barry Weiss is lying to staff about his exit from the company. Miles Taylor will react.
And later, as we follow breaking developments on the outstanding primary races, Donald Trump isn't focused on elections. Instead, he can't stop talking about his precious D.C. renovations. We got more on that soon. But we begin with breaking news on the president's slush fund. A day after acting Attorney General Todd Blanche declared the fund dead, Donald Trump now claims he didn't get the memo, and he's still toying with the idea of payouts for insurrectionists. Here's the president just a short time ago.
Is the $1.8 billion DOJ fund dead, or is it on hold?
It's, I'd have to ask the lawyers, I don't know.
The anti-weaponization fund, have you dropped that?
No, a court ruled against it.
Yeah.
But just so you understand, these are people that have been decimated. These are people that lost their lives over nonsense. And these were many great people. And I gave them pardons. I'm very proud to have given them pardons. And I think they should be reimbursed for a crooked government. The government was crooked.
Line what he just said there in that last clip. He signaled he still supports government payouts for pardoned insurrectionists. It's just a matter of how and of when. And even though Todd Blanche claims he dropped the slush fund, Trump's DOJ might have other plans. Last night, a top DOJ lawyer suggested the department could find another way to pay people who claim they're victims of a weaponized government. Associate Attorney General Stanley Woodward posted, quote, "We're on it." He later deleted that post. That declaration was in response to a push by Lindsey Graham to establish a new payout scheme for anyone with, quote, meritorious weaponization claims. Meanwhile, other Senate Republicans are standing up to Trump's Justice Department, questioning whether the slush fund is really dead. And they're ready to force their party to vote on legislation banning it for good.
So here's the thing, just real quick. The president in the clip you played, Alicia, said the government was crooked, so they should get the payout. It was his government. His government was the one that looked into this event. It was his government. So I don't understand all of a sudden, this idea.
The same people were employed from, it's not like there was substantial turnover from January 6, 2021 to that later in that January when Biden took office.
So it makes no sense to me. And again, this is one more backdoor way that they're already sliding. We said it up front. I mean, the three of us were very clear up front when this was announced. Stay tuned because this is not going anywhere.
Here's the thing. I am very disturbed. Okay, I'm concerned that the president of the United States continues to advocate for payouts of people that we watched the assault happen on camera. I don't know if we have any B-roll from January 6th, but if so, please put it up on the screen. We saw this unfold before our very eyes.
These were his supporters.
These were his supporters. I'm very confused and concerned why the president of the United States is so adamant that these people's records be wiped clean and they also receive monetary compensation. Why is he so adamant about this? We need to continue to ask the question. I continue to believe that this is not just about 2020. This is also about 2026. So I don't know. Maybe the president promised these payouts. Maybe there's some backroom deal somewhere, but we need to continue to get to the bottom of this one because this is a little sketch.
Real quick, Alicia, how devastated that individual was who crapped all over Nancy Pelosi's desk. How devastated was he? Should he get a payout, Mr. President?
I believe you mean that as a rhetorical question, not for me, but for the president. I think Symone is asking exactly the right question because it would seem that this is not just retrospective. This is very much prospective. It is a promise of what's to come. Let's bring into our conversation Democratic Senator Gary Peters of Michigan. He is the ranking member of the Homeland Security Committee.
Senator, there's a lot here that we just laid on the table. I want to add into the mix Speaker Mike Johnson refusing to comment on Trump's tax audit deal. This was today.
Part of the president's IRS settlement said that his family's business and his family's tax returns up to this point cannot be audited. Is that appropriate?
I'm not going to comment on that. That's part of litigation. I mean, that's...
Well, it was a settlement. No, it was a settlement. And Todd Blanche said that part's staying in law. It's remaining as it is despite the weaponization fund.
It's part of a litigation. It's not part of law.
So here's the thing. Speaker Johnson is saying it's still part of litigation. I'm not a lawyer, but I do read. Michael Steele's a lawyer. Was there a settlement?
No.
Okay.
Look, this was no litigation. It was no settlement. This was just an agreement that Donald Trump made with his damn self. Let's be clear. Stop it, y'all.
So are you concerned about any of this, Senator? It does not seem on the up and up on many levels, from the IRS promises about not just Trump, but his family, extends all the way to the children who are currently benefiting from the fact that their father is the president of the United States, and also this $1.8 billion slush fund.
Yeah, it is a complete scam. Let's be clear about that. And he brought really a sham lawsuit, which wasn't a legitimate settlement. You can't negotiate with yourself. You sue your own government. You're basically negotiating with a guy you put into office who was your personal attorney beforehand. And it's no surprise that they cut this deal, which is, I think, one of the most corrupt things a president can do. There's never been a president in the history of our country that would have ever even tried this. This is so outrageous. The fact that he's really the deal in here for him is the one that it was the question you asked of the speaker. You know, basically no audits for his tax activities prior to the settlement. We know that he'd actually, from those returns, didn't pay taxes. We have Americans that pay their taxes every day. They don't get a blank check to do whatever they want and not have the IRS audit them. It's been estimated by some folks that when those audits are completed, the president may have to pay up to $100 million in back taxes. That's what this is about for the president. He's raiding the taxpayers through the slush fund. He's trying to get away from paying his taxes and having responsibility or accountability for the fact that he evaded taxes, which would possibly come out in the audit. Clearly, he's afraid of that. That's why he's doing what he's doing. But this is a sham, plain and simple.
You know, Michael Steele, when I worked at the White House, you could not go into your job into the White House. You would not be issued a security clearance, let alone a badge, if you had unpaid taxes. And so the fact that the president of the United States, we know from reports and his own things the president has said himself that he hasn't paid his taxes, yet he said the double standard is another reason why the American people are like, this is a bunch of BS.
So to your point, Symone and Senator, that process has not changed. My first government job was back in 1978, y'all. Right? And again, you had to come correct. You just couldn't show up with unpaid taxes,
right.
And you couldn't show up with any court things kind of hanging out there, which Donald Trump got a lot of those hanging out there.
Right.
So we know this is a hot mess. They know it's a hot mess, but here's the attitude of this administration. What you going to do about it? What you going to do about it? There's nothing. You can't stop me, right? You've got 5 lingering questions about Trump's anti-weaponization fund that was sort of put out there. And one of the things they noted was, before the demise of the fund, DOJ officials emphasized that they already enjoy authority to order payments of essentially unlimited amounts to settle lawsuits. That baseline authority hasn't gone away. So we can do what we want to do. Who's going to stop us? You've appropriated the money. We can spend it however we want. Folks, that's not how this works. That's not how the government works. That's not how it's laid out. So help us understand where they're coming from here.
Well, you're absolutely right. And if there is a settlement fund, which there is, that's when you have a legitimate settlement, actually where you have adverse parties that come together and you settle. There was no adverse party here. This was Donald Trump suing himself and having his lackeys saying, okay, we'll dip into the till of the taxpayers and create this slush fund. So the courts need to review that, but Congress needs to take action. We could take action now. We've got a reconciliation coming up, which allows us to put legislation. We're going to be offering that as my Democratic colleagues. Some of my Republican colleagues, to their credit, have been saying this is outrageous. This is a bridge too far, that they are not going to tolerate it. But now it's time to actually put votes up.
I was going to say, how they going to vote?
This is the key. It's nice to talk the talk, but we're going to make people actually take the vote to be on record. And that's where, our founders always thought that we have checks and balances, and that the Congress is a independent branch of government, and actually the premier branch, according to our founders, that they would stand up to a president that's trying to assert power, and certainly a president that's engaged in such corrupt activities that should never be tolerated in this country. And, the unfortunate thing is we don't necessarily have all the laws to constrain a president, because it was always believed that you would always have a president who would not openly flaunt the law, violate the law, be able to engage in that. And for the most part, we've been very lucky over our history. We haven't had it until now. Now we have a president who norms, laws, none of that matters to him. And as long as he has Republicans in Congress that refuse to stand up and exercise their constitutional responsibilities to provide a check on the executive, he can get away with it. So hopefully it won't happen this time. We're going to put everybody on the record.
All right.
So, Congressman, along those same lines, let's talk about the president's new pick for Director of National Intelligence, Bill Pulte, and what Senator Thom Tillis, Republican of North Carolina, had to say about the merits of that pick.
I don't believe he's ever had a security clearance. He clearly has no experience in intelligence. He has no geopolitical experience, no international connections, the sorts of things you would look for. Whoever told the president to go ahead and commit to this publicly before vetting it should lose their jobs, because they should know that the math just works against Pulte being confirmed.
Someone could have told the president that.
What's that?
Someone could have told the president that, and it still happened.
That may be true, but then it's on the president.
Senator, forgive me because I did demote you to the lower chamber before I teed up that sound. But in addition to hearing from...
He did. He didn't even flinch, Alicia.
He took it with grace.
I'm a proud former House member as well, so I take it all.
Past and present. I thought that was interesting. I thought what we heard in a statement from Senator McConnell was notable. The senator saying very few Senate confirmable positions come with statutory eligibility requirements. Anyone performing this role of such immense public trust must have the extensive national security experience required by statute, and no nominee who falls short of this requirement will earn my vote. The sense we've been getting, Senator, talking with your colleagues, is that the expectation is that this president knows that he doesn't have the votes in the Senate and is just going to, from now on, have acting heads of a variety of agencies. I wonder both if you agree with that analysis, and if that is the case, to your point about checks and balances, where that leaves the U.S. Senate in acting as a check on this president.
Yeah, it is a problem that you put in basically an acting director here. They can serve for a little over 200 days, and then you have to have a Senate confirmation. But there's a way to get around that, too. The rule is then if he were to nominate somebody that is then going through the process, basically Mr. Pulte could stay in that job. And who knows, he could put somebody up there that there's no way the Senate's going to take up. But because there's a nominee forward under the rules, he can stay there. Mm-hmm. And I certainly, I appreciate Senator Tillis's comments. This is a guy who has absolutely zero experience in one of the most important jobs that we have in the federal government at a time when we're in war and we're facing threats from terrorist threats that are very real. You expect to have an intelligence director who actually understands the job, has experience in the job, and can provide unbiased, qualified opinions and recommendations to the president. You're not getting that. And unfortunately, this appointment to this acting position really follows the pattern of what we've seen from this president, that he doesn't care about qualifications. He doesn't care about experience. The only thing he cares about is loyalty. Are you going to be 100% loyal to him? And that's not in the American interest to have somebody in this key position, director of intelligence, that needs to provide the kind of insight and expertise that a president needs to make sound decisions that protect us and keep us safe. To have an unqualified person, let's be clear, it makes America less safe and it puts people at risk in our country.
I'm so glad you said that. I continue to be concerned about November. It all goes back to this November for me. I'm concerned about what Bill Pulte is willing to do in this role. We've already seen what he's willing to do over in the housing
what his
agency.
predecessor was willing to do.
I mean, she was there when they snatched the ballots from Fulton County.
Right, that's right.
Okay. They have also gotten other states and territories like Puerto Rico to voluntarily turn over ballots from the 2020 election. What the government did, HSI, by the way, DHS, get into it, folks. What do you think Bill Pulte is willing to do come this November? Think about what he did to Tish James. Think about what he did to Adam Schiff. Think about what he attempted to do to James Comey. I mean, he is literally ready to trump up charges, for lack of a better term, about mortgage fraud against anyone the president doesn't like. Now he's the top of the information apparatus where he can make anything up.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely spot on to be worried. I'm worried about that. Most of my colleagues are all worried about that as well. As you said, he's already demonstrated this. This is not hypothetical. He did this in his current position, that he took sensitive information to go after folks who the president perceived as an enemy, to try to discredit them on trumped up charges as well. So he's already done that. And I can just imagine what that conversation was like when he was talking to the president. It was probably a very scary conversation about what he told him. If you put me in this position, I can do X, Y, and Z. We don't know. I wasn't there. I can't say that for sure. But based on past behavior, normally that's usually a good indication of what future behavior is when you look at what he's done in the past.
Senator Gary Peters of Michigan, thank you for kicking us off tonight. Very ominous, but real, and we were glad you were here to have the conversation. Stay with us, folks. The turmoil at 60 Minutes is escalating tonight. Miles Taylor is here to discuss the breaking details as Scott Pelley fires back at CBS chief Barry Weiss's latest accusations. We'll get into it. And later, we have some breaking developments on those undecided primary races out of California. You are watching The Weeknight.
CBS News editor-in-chief Barry Weiss. Well, yeah, she's defending the firing of 60 Minutes correspondent Scott Pelley. On a staff call today, Weiss claimed Pelley had refused to reach a solution with executives after he accused management of, quote, murdering the program during a tense meeting with a new executive producer, Nick Bilton. Now, Pelley says that Weiss, quote, knows what she said is not true. No CBS executive at any time suggested a way back. To say so now is disingenuous, and they know it. Joining us now is Miles Taylor, former DHS Chief of Staff and founder of Defense.org.
Yes, defiance. The people at CBS Scott Pelley, one could argue, was being defiant, or he was being courageous, or he was just telling it like it is. What we all know to be true, Miles Taylor. This is about who decides what is true. Even as Michael just read about how CBS is characterizing what happened to Scott Pelley, and then you have Scott Pelley in his own words.
That's not happening.
Yes, like saying, let's just read from some of this. This is Scott Pelley in his own words saying the CBS staff was misled in that call that Barry Weiss did this morning. I am pained that the staff of CBS News was misled in the Wednesday morning conference call. These executives cannot gain the trust of the staff with lies. This is antithetical to everything we stand for and reveals contempt for what journalists do. They're lying according to Scott Pelley, the staff at CBS News. They're trying to inject a bias into the stories that are happening. And so how can we trust them to tell us the truth?
You cannot trust them. And the first thing we have to do is we have to applaud Scott Pelley for what he did. Because we all know at this table, and I'm not going to call them out, we all know a bunch of journalists, and they're not at this network, they're at other networks, that should be Scott Pelley's right now, but they're not. They're biding their time while the First Amendment is under a systematic assault. This administration is arresting journalists. This administration is raiding the homes of journalists. This administration is taking over the networks they work at because they want to fire the ones that they don't like. This administration is kicking them off of Air Force One, is kicking them out of the Pentagon, is taking over the social media networks and censoring the terms that people type in. This is insane. This is an apocalyptic moment for journalism in this country, and people got to act like it. And Scott Pelley this week, he acted like it.
Yeah.
But this is a message to all those other journalists. They know who they are. They know when they hear my voice that they're probably one of them, the ones that are cowering and hoping that they can feed the alligator and it will go back to normal. It ain't going back to normal unless y'all start acting like Scott Pelley.
I think you're getting it exactly right there, Miles Taylor. This is a moment where there are lots of villains and there aren't many heroes. And so when we see a hero, when we see a profile in courage, we have to take that moment to applaud folks. I'm struck by the fact that this, to me, has echoes of a conversation you've been having with the two of us for the past 2 years, which is, if you want to understand what Trump and his acolytes are up to, look at Viktor Orban. He is just playing his playbook. And one of the things that you warned us about many times over the past 2 years was the fact that a big part of dismantling democracy and institutions was going to be going after a fair and free press. In the case of Orban, they did that in part by making sure that his allies had control of media institutions and media apparatus so that they could turn what was once news and information into propaganda. In your sort of global sense, where are we in that timeline?
Unfortunately, we're in an earlier part of the timeline, because there's a lot more things that can happen. Here's what year one was about. Year one of the second Trump administration was about putting the infrastructure in place. If you're going to produce a product, you got to build a machine to make it replicable, and it takes a while to build the machine. They built the machine in year one. They're turning it on in year two. But let me give you something concrete there. After the president came after me when he came back into office, a little known thing happened in the Attorney General's office. She signed an order revoking protections for journalists. The Justice Department used to have a very high standard if you were going to investigate journalists, because you were going at the only constitutionally protected profession in the United States, journalism, right? So it required higher approval. She rescinded those protections. And in her memo, she cited the president's investigation into me. In other words, to go after the president's enemies, we can't be protecting journalists and these people that whistleblowers go talk to. We got to be able to dig into those whistleblowers' files. That happened in year one. It got almost no news coverage. Here it got some news coverage. Well, now it's happening. The machine's turned on. They are raiding those journalists' houses. They are opening investigations. And when you see one or two ants on top of a log, there's a hell of a lot of ants under the log. What we don't know is what we don't know. How many other investigations do they have into how many other networks? And the way you combat it, if you want to learn from Orban and Hungary, you got to have more Scott Pelley speaking out. So I'm talking to my friends at CNN, because they're trying to feed the alligator. The alligator's taken over your boat. There's a bunch of would-be Scott Pelleys at other networks that should take this moment to do the right thing and speak loudly.
It's so profoundly important, as everyone at this table has noted, what this moment means and how it's playing out. And I thought it was very telling, because the thread that's going to wind us or move us into the future was really in Pelley's statement as well. Symone touched on it a moment ago, when he talked about, politicizing, the politicization of stories. He noted, new management has instructed me to inject falsehoods and bias into a politically sensitive story. I've been told to include assertions that are unverified. To date, in every case, I've managed to ignore these instructions or refuse them. Recently, politicians have been invited to choose correspondents for interviews on the broadcast. Giving politicians control over 60 minutes, 60-minute interviews is not how this is done. That's the future that they're setting up. And it's very, very important, that we understand that. Now, MS Now has reached out to CBS about Pelley's accusations, and they've declined to comment. I would think you'd want to, but okay, that's their prerogative. But that's the problem, right? Is that these things are happening and no one is clarifying their intent. So if Pelley is lying, if Pelley is wrong, as management, I'm going to be out there. No. Y'all don't understand. Time out. This is what here's the minutes from the meeting. Right? Because of the institution that you are.
Mm-hmm.
You are a broadcast network. You are a mega publication, a grand newspaper that everyone over time has come to respect. So how do we look at this beyond this? Because this is where the thread is going. The thread is going to where journalists will decide which reporters they want to talk to. And they'll do that interview that is really good and cushy and nice, and no hard questions are asked about the behavior of that politician or the programs that they're doing.
Well, we're headed towards state media. I mean, it's far from hyperbole at this point. It is the reality we are living in. This administration last year started signaling they were willing to use regulatory powers, the legal powers of the government, to help decide who took over some of these big networks like CBS, like, CNN and its parent company, by saying the president of the United States likes some people on these networks, he doesn't like other people, and we'll open antitrust investigations and we'll tip the scales if we have to. That's what happened in Hungary. That's how we ended up with a country where most of the major news networks were saying what the administration wanted them to say. The biggest scandals that have been exposed in the history of the United States would not have been exposed if we didn't have a free press. People wouldn't know what was happening. No. That's why this matters, folks. I don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican or independent. This matters. And if you are a Republican, and if you are a MAGA supporting Republican, you should hate this just as much. Because in 2.5 years, you don't want the Democrats to come in and wield this power and have their billionaire buddies take over networks and control the news that you watch and what people are interviewing the public officials. You don't want that. Americans need to be united. The First Amendment doesn't just belong to some people. It belongs to all the people.
Informed citizenry.
Informed citizenry. But we all know that's not the intent, to have Democrats come and take over the government after Donald Trump. We know that those seeds are being well planted now, and that's a bigger conversation that ties all of this together.
It is.
You're going to be at the table to help us do it. Miles Taylor, thank you so much, sir. After the break, the nation is focused on high gas prices and economic pain, and Donald Trump, remains focused on reflecting pools and malls and balls and all that. Projects, we'll get into it right after this.
Well, folks, at this hour, key primaries in California are still undecided. In the governor's race, Republican Steve Hilton is leading, followed closely by Democrat Javier Becerra and Tom Steyer. And in the race for Los Angeles mayor, incumbent Karen Bass will advance to the general election, but it's still unclear who she'll face. In California, the top two candidates, regardless of party, are the ones who advance to the general in November. And because millions of mail-in ballots are still arriving, final calls could take days. That's why we don't know. Meanwhile, as the midterms get closer and the president's job approval continues to tank, Donald Trump is not focused on turning the tide or helping Republicans. He is focused again on his D.C. makeover.
That's your size compared. So those are among the tallest buildings in the world. And we picked a color called American Flag Blue. We had color choices. And before it was just gray, it was a color of concrete and stone.
Joining us at the table is MSNOW political analyst Cornell Belcher. He's a pollster and a Democratic strategist. I can't believe the president of the United States is spending his time doing this.
Okay, but even more important than that, does he not know that a pool does not stand upward? It lays flat on the ground, so you can't compare a building to a pool. But
he also said, "I just had this made." He said, "I just had this made up."
He's proud of the dumb stuff. He's proud of the dumb stuff. So, Cornell, we witnessed this going on, and folks around Washington can be a little bit jaded by some of it. We and offended in ways that, those of who have been in this town for a while and know that this just is not the thing. But the curiosity that I have, and I know a lot of folks have, is what are folks out there saying when they see the president spending valuable presidential time holding up placards showing buildings that he once built and pools, reflecting pools as if they're stand-up models and monuments? What do they say?
Well, I think there is real concern out there. And again, there's real concern out there that something is awry.
It comes up in the focus group?
Right, that something is not quite right. But you also see it in the data. And look, one of the most striking data points we had over the last couple of weeks is how they're collapsing among non-college white voters. Right, a group that has been his
non-college white voters.
His numbers are collapsing among non-college white voters, and that's where you see this. Right, that's where you see where he's gone so far off the rails that even a group that broke really hard for him and sort of the base of his support is beginning to weaken and polling, and it's beginning to weaken because of things like this, because he's clearly not focused on anything serious about the American people, right? And again, it's not like they've fallen in love with Democrats, because they haven't.
Right.
But they're certainly weakening and pulling away from Donald Trump. And the question is, how will they be enthusiastic or motivated to turn out and vote for Republicans in the midterm? Again, not that they're breaking for Democrats, but there's certainly is Donald
Trump. They got to be doing
crater.
something, Symone. I mean, they're just, what do you think?
Look, I think that Democrats, this is not, as y'all both know, this is not a presidential, right? And so you got to run district by district or state by state, depending on what office we're looking at, whether we're talking about the House or the Senate. But my sense in talking to Democrats and some of my strategist friends is that they know that Republicans are weak out there. They are aware that Republican voters are not very enthusiastic. But that running against the crazy is not just enough. So they have to talk proactively about the things that they're doing, on how that they want to do if they're put back in charge, on housing, on the other pieces of affordability like childcare, helping bring prices down. But I have talked to people that still say they feel like maybe people are doing what they did in 2016 when they would tell the pollsters, oh, no, can't stand them. I'm very distraught with what's going on. And then they go into the booth and they voted for Trump anyway. Or are they going to do that for Republicans this time? There are some people in some of these districts that I've heard that are like, we don't know.
Look, I'm going to take a moment here and calm down. To blame 2016 on the polling is just
the pollsters are about to stand up for themselves. Understood.
Most of the polling in 2016 had the race a toss-up, and in the end, he actually didn't even win the popular vote, right? So that aside, here's my problem with these Dem strategists who are saying this. Sure, you got to talk about what you're saying, but I swear to you, if Democrats make this an election, not a referendum on Donald Trump and his craziness, and somehow try to make this an election about their 5-point plan, we're going to get what we deserve. Because this is absolutely a referendum on Donald Trump and the Republicans following him in Congress. And if we don't stay focused on that, then the midterm is in danger.
Cornell.
This is why people should listen to Cornell.
Neither I nor my compatriots got much sleep last night. We're up late doing election analysis as these results came in. So I am in a punchy mood, and I am here to stir the pot because Symone and Michael disagreed deeply on what is happening out in Iowa and the stakes out in Iowa. I want you to take a listen to Josh Turek on our network last night, talking about what he thinks his victory indicates.
I know that a lot of your viewers will look at Iowa as a red state, and what I've been going around the state saying over and over and over is we're not a red state. We're a common sense state that is masqueraded more red than what we were. This is a generational chance of no power of incumbency, a state that has hit the bottom, and candidates like myself and Rob Sand with proven ability to be able to win over the independents and the moderate Republicans. We can win this thing.
Cornell, I'm not going to tell you who's on which side. Do you agree with Josh Turek's assessment there?
Well, look, it's not so long ago that I remember a senator by the name of Harkin, who was a Democrat, and by the way, not necessarily the most conservative Democrat either, who carried that state by speaking, to the issues and values of the state. I also worked for a guy who in 2012, by the name of Barack Obama, who also carried that state narrowly. This idea that Iowa was a solid red state, I agree with. I don't think it is a solid red state. And particularly now, again, if this is a referendum on Donald Trump, and look at how the tariffs have devastated that state. Look at how the farmers are hurting because of the policies coming out of Washington. And you have, again, an open seat. And we've talked about this before, right? an open seat is the thing, right? It's hard to knock off an incumbent, but if you have an open seat with a volatile electorate and it's a referendum on an unpopular president, I kind of like our chances in Iowa, especially with a candidate who is sort of an outsider and can speak and connect to the values and issues of the voters in Iowa. I like our chances, right? It's not an easy state to win, but I think this is the best chance we've had in Iowa for a long, long time.
Justice for the Midwest out there. Okay, can I go back to California for a second? Because
but where are you? But
I am of the belief that Iowa matters, and Michael Steele was of the belief that it is not a bellwether. But wait. I want to go back to California for a second, because our elections guru here at MS Now, Kabir Khanna, just sent us a note underscoring that Los Angeles just reported more votes, and the gap between Pratt, who's currently in second, and Rahman, who's currently in third, just decreased by 3,000 votes. The margin separating them is now at 7 percentage points. So this kind of trend is exactly why decision desks are exhibiting caution with a projection. So we're not going to get a call tonight, folks, for who the second candidate is advancing, and this is why those mail-in votes.
I just want to put a pin in that point for our viewers and those who will see this in other platforms. Every state has a way of processing their elections, folks, and so please do not fall into stupid coming out of this administration about corruption because, there's still mail-in ballots coming in California. That's the way the system works there. They have a process that allows their voters, the time to vote, right? In Florida, they're jackrabbits. The vote comes in and they count it, and we know within hours after their polls close. That's the American process. Those are the folks out there that you poll and try to figure out what they're thinking before they go to those polls. But those two pieces come together for voters in different ways. And folks, you just need to chill back and look at what you do in your state. Don't worry about what happened somewhere else. And damn sure don't listen to anybody out of this administration about how this system works.
Mind your own electoral business.
Michael Steele with the civics lesson on the weeknight.
Cornell Belcher, thank you for being our tiebreaker. Always good to see you ahead.